Chapter 106. How long do you want to keep pretending? Jianyun saw that person slowly turn around. She also saw that person's handsome but extremely cold face. At this moment, she suddenly widened her eyes and a cold air climbed up her back. Her first reaction was to turn around and slam the door. Open the door, let me out. She desperately tried to twist the door handle, but the door seemed to be locked from the outside. She could not open it, no matter how hard she tried. God, how could it be Huo Liancheng? Could it be that the guest Pu Qigong mentioned was him? At this moment, Jianyun felt like she was struck by lightning. Her heart was filled with regret. If she had known it was him, she would not have come here even if she was beaten to death. However, Huo Liancheng seemed to turn a blind eye to Jianyun's nervousness and fear. He was leisurely leaning on the swivel chair with red wine in his hand. His eyes were half closed, and he had an unconcealable noble aura. He even started reciting a poem. Nantang autumn. Lotus flowers head over head. Lowering his head. If it was any other day, how elegant would such a handsome man be when reciting a poem? He would definitely be mesmerized. But now, Jianyun could not understand the meaning of poetry at all. She did not have the time to be shocked that he actually knew this folk song of the ancient Le Manor. She only had a creepy feeling of fear. She knew that she couldn't leave today, so she didn't struggle anymore. Instead, she turned around to face the gloomy Huo Liancheng with a face full of vigilance. She thought that Huo Liancheng would definitely humiliate her like that day. She was prepared. As long as he said scram again, she would disappear from his face immediately. However, Huo Liancheng did not get angry. Instead, he placed the cup in his hand on the table. He looked up at her and said softly, "Come here." Jianyun did not move. Huo Liancheng suddenly sneered, "How long more do you want to pretend?" After he finished speaking, he suddenly stood up and walked towards Jianyun step by step. "Didn't you say you wanted to resign and get married? Is this how your fiancé raised you? Is it related to you?" Jianyun was frightened by the hostility on his body. She wanted to retreat, but her back was already against the door. She could only look up at Huo Liancheng calmly. "President Huo, please let them open the door." "Open the door?" Huo Liancheng raised his eyebrows and said disdainfully, "Didn't Pu Qigong tell you that you're going to stay and wait on me tonight?" "Nonsense, he said that he only wanted me to talk to you. I don't want to stay with guests." When Jianyun heard these words, her face immediately turned pale. At this time, Huo Liancheng had already arrived in front of Jianyun. He was tall and had long arms. The strong masculine aura around his body enveloped her all of a sudden. Jianyun became even more nervous. She only felt the coldness permeating her body and her entire body stiffen, but she had no way to escape. "I don't think this is your first time coming to a place like this. Why are you still so naive?" Huo Liancheng stood in front of Jianyun. They were very close. He gently touched Jianyun's lips but sneered, "You only said a few words and I will give you 50,000? What do you think you were talking about? So valuable?" This sentence was even more hurtful than what he had said before. The chill once again climbed to her heart. Jianyun felt as if something had exploded in her head. She loosened her hands and the bag that she had been tightly holding fell to the ground. The zipper of the bag was open, and the two thick envelopes inside fell out all of a sudden. Huo Liancheng's eyes were suddenly filled with blood. Jianyun had no time to care. She closed her eyes and told herself not to be angered, but the strong sense of shame still held her back. She bit her lips and resisted the anger and trembling of her body because of being humiliated. After a while, she said, "I don't want the money. Let me go." Huo Liancheng saw Jianyun's face turn pale and scary, and then red. He clenched his fists and his breathing became heavy. He really wanted to ask her, but when he thought of the occupation she might be engaged in, he felt a chill in his heart. He could bear the fact that she had countless ex-boyfriends, but he could not accept the fact that she might be a high-level chicken, even if she looked so clean on the surface. "You still want to leave after entering this place?" Huo Liancheng could not help but grab Jianyun's neck. He stared at her coldly, his eyes blood red. He asked word by word, "How many things are you hiding from me? You don't know how to dance. You are clearly with a man, but you tell me that you are sleeping at home? What you said, which one was true, and which one was false?" Jianyun's throat was pinched. She could not catch her breath. She reached out and grabbed Huo Liancheng's wrist, trying to break his hand, but he was too strong. She could not move him at all. "I just found out. It's not that you don't like what I gave you. It's you who are born cheap. Without a man, you won't be able to live." The more Huo Liancheng spoke, the angrier he became. As long as he met Jianyun, the calmness that he had always been proud of would disappear. His words were also very hurtful. "Tell me, how much do you want to sell at once?" Jianyun finally broke free from Huo Liancheng's grip. She was so angry that she almost went crazy. After coughing violently, she no longer cared if she was at a disadvantage or if she did not care about the consequences of angering Huo Liancheng. She smiled provocatively and said, "Yes, I am lowly. I like this kind of life, so what? I earn money on my own. What right do you have to say that to me? You." Huo Liancheng saw that Jianyun was still smiling and his anger was ignited again. However, Jianyun did not give him the chance to speak. "I never asked you to think highly of me. You said that you wanted to pursue me. I rejected you because I do not want to be confined to a man's side. Jian Yun laughed as she spoke. Yes, I just like men. I admit that I like seeing men fall in love with me. Are you satisfied? Lowly. Huo Liancheng was already overwhelmed by anger. He clenched his fists tightly. It was almost impossible to tell whether Jian Yun was telling the truth or not. I am degraded. Don't you want to sleep with me? Okay. Then 50,000 will be my salary. I have so many guests. It doesn't matter if you have one more. Jian Yun was so angry that her whole body was shaking. She started to take off her clothes. She was gambling on Huo Liancheng's reaction after hearing those words. Jian Yun was still wearing the bright blue cheongsam. It was a thin piece that outlined her slim figure. The right side was spread to her waist, revealing her long straight legs and 10 centimeters high heels. Her dress was very charming, and it was enough to make a man's blood boil when he saw it. Jian Yun only took off one button, and the moment she revealed her breasts, she saw Huo Liancheng suddenly narrow his eyes. His eyes shot out a cold light. And then he coldly shouted, "Scram!" Jian Yun secretly heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that she had won the bet, but she still wanted to continue acting. Not only did Jian Yun not follow Huo Liancheng's wishes and leave, but she also took off another button. She also walked to Huo Liancheng's side and kept sticking to his body. She even deliberately made a seductive gesture and said coquettishly, "I won't leave. You paid for it, so I have to serve you well. I understand this kind of professional ethics." Chapter 107. I told you to scram. I told you to get out. Huo Liancheng could not hold it in any longer. He suddenly stretched out his hand and pushed Jian Yun with his palm, pushing her away in an instant. Jian Yun did not expect him to push her like this. Her body was already very weak. This push from him actually pushed her heavily to the ground. Her back also pressed against the door. She only felt her vision turn black, and then countless stars appeared. The pain made her unable to straighten her back for a long time. I was really blind to take a fancy to a dirty woman like you. Huo Liancheng did not even look at Jian Yun. His current mood was completely filled with anger, making him unable to see anything. Get lost, he said angrily. Jian Yun smiled softly. This was the second time he had called her dirty. That's right, he thought she was dirty, and she had achieved her goal. Jian Yun wanted to stand up, but her legs were so soft, as if she was stepping on cotton. Her mind was in a mess, and stars appeared in front of her eyes. She tried to hold on to the door and barely managed to stand up. General Manager Huo, I gave you the chance. It's you who don't want it. Jian Yun bent over and picked up the bag on the ground. She conveniently stuffed the 2 envelopes containing money into it. This scene was extremely eye-piercing to Huo Liancheng. Jian Yun reached out and held the handle. She did not know if it was Pu Jigang who heard the quarrel outside, so he opened the lock from the outside, or if the lock was originally controlled by the person in the door. In short, this time, she easily twisted the handle. Jian Yun really wanted to leave this place quickly, but she suddenly felt dizzy, so she could only close her eyes and stop for a moment. However, in these few seconds, Huo Liancheng suddenly reacted. At this time, Jian Yun had already opened the door a crack and was about to walk out. Huo Liancheng suddenly rushed over and grabbed her wrist, trying to lie to me again. He pulled her back and closed the door again. Let go of me. Jian Yun screamed and subconsciously tried to break Huo Liancheng's big hand, but she could not use any strength. In desperation, she bit the back of his hand. Jian Yun almost used all her strength and hatred on her teeth. She bit down hard, and blood immediately flowed out from the corner of her mouth, but Huo Liancheng did not react at all. He just looked at her expressionlessly, as if he was not the one who bit her. On the contrary, Jian Yun could not bite down. She lowered her head and looked at the deep bite mark on the back of Huo Liancheng's hand. After a while, she looked up at him and smiled. It looks like you need to go to the hospital to get an injection to prevent infection from me. Are you done? Huo Liancheng asked coldly. I am. Jian Yun nodded seriously. She turned around and turned the door handle again. I'm leaving. Did I allow you to leave? Huo Liancheng stood by the door and put his hand on the door. Jian Yun's expression changed slightly, but she immediately smiled. She put one hand on Huo Liancheng's chest and smiled. Could it be that you changed your mind and want to sleep with me again? Huo Liancheng pursed his lips and looked at Jian Yun with his eyes half lowered. He did not say anything. Jian Yun did not know what he was up to. Her eyes flashed. She gritted her teeth and reached out to unbutton his shirt. She threw a flirtatious glance at him and moved closer to his lips. Then let's not delay any longer. Let's shoot. If you want to do it, hurry up. I still have to rush the next order. Jian Yun originally thought that Huo Liancheng would push her away again, but what surprised her was that this time, although she could clearly feel the anger in her eyes, he did not dodge. He only narrowed his eyes and stared at her. Jian Yun could not back down for a moment and could only bite the bullet and kiss his lips. This was the first time she took the initiative to kiss him, but she did not expect it to be in such a situation. His lips were very thin, the lines of his lips were tightly pursed, and the blade was as sharp as a blade. It was said in books that men with lips like this were all lovers, and were not good people who were suitable for a lifetime. Jian Yun felt that Huo Liancheng was mauled. No matter how good his conditions were, no matter how rich he was, she did not want to have anything to do with him. She wanted to find someone who could accompany her for a lifetime, and not a man. His lips were cold, and there was a pleasant smell in his breath. However, Jen Yun could not continue kissing. She was already putting on an act. If she continued acting, she would really lose herself. She stopped and wanted to escape, but Huo Liancheng did not let go of this opportunity. He saw that Jen Yun had the intention to retreat. He immediately extended his palm and grabbed the back of her head, instantly deepening the kiss. Jen Yun frowned and did not hide the shock in her eyes. She pushed him but could not move no matter what. She was so anxious that she used her fists to hit him. But her strength was like a massage for him. Not only did it not hinder him, but it also made him even crazier. Gradually, Jen Yun felt the air in her lungs being sucked away. Suddenly, the world in front of her eyes spun. She was already very weak and could not hold on anymore. Her body went soft and she fainted just like that. She fainted in Huo Liancheng's arms. At this time, Huo Liancheng also let go of Jen Yun's lips. He hugged her and lowered his head to look at her pale little face. There was a burst of irritation in his heart for no reason. His intuition told him that she deliberately said those words to anger him. He did not want to believe her words, but how could he explain what he saw? She lied and lied to him over and over again. It was true that she was dancing in this kind of place. Also, for tens of thousands of dollars, she easily agreed to accompany the guests. And she did date a few men at the same time, so after all these things, could it not be said that she was a woman? She was already far from the beautiful appearance in his memories. He did not even know if she was worth waiting for him. Huo Liancheng carried Jen Yun and walked to the bedside to put her down. He sat at the side and quietly stared at her. Only when she was asleep could she overlap with the appearance in his memory. But why did she faint? Or was she acting on purpose to gain his sympathy? Or was she continuing to play tricks to escape from him? Thinking of this, Huo Liancheng frowned. He lightly patted Jian Yun's face, but she didn't react. He also just realized that after a few days of not seeing her, she had actually lost a lot of weight. Her originally small palm and small face had become even thinner, and her chin had become even sharper. Even if there was heavy makeup on her face, it could not cover her haggard face. When he had just picked her up, he found that she was pitifully light. What exactly had happened to her? That day, after he scolded her, she rushed out before the lunch break ended. Did something happen to her that day? Huo Liancheng was guessing what might happen. Suddenly, he heard his phone ring. It came from Jian Yun's bag on the ground. He turned around and picked up her bag. When he opened it, he first saw the 2 envelopes containing money. His eyes flashed coldly. He took out his phone, looked at the caller ID, and picked it up. Chapter 108, Why Not Me? The call was from Wu Wenjing. As soon as the call was picked up, she was calling from the other side. Jen Yun, why aren't you coming out yet? When Huo Liancheng heard this, his brows immediately knitted together. Wu Wenjing knew that Jen Yun came to this kind of place. Wu Wenjing did not sense anything wrong at all. She heard the sound of breathing on the phone. She thought Jen Yun was so tired that she did not want to talk. She even said very considerate, "It's over. Are you tired? Come out quickly. I brought you millet porridge. You haven't eaten for a few days. If this continues, Auntie will not recover and your body will collapse." "Hello, Jen Yun. Why are you not talking? Did something happen? Don't scare me. My little heart can't take it anymore. Hurry up and say something." Wu Wenjing talked for a long time. She saw that the other end of the phone was still quiet. She was careless and also noticed that something was not right. She said, "Who are you? Where is Jian Yun? Don't act recklessly. I will call the police." At this moment, Huo Liancheng opened his mouth. "It's me, Huo Liancheng." Wu Wenjing was stunned for a few seconds before she realized what was going on. However, she was still not sure. She asked tentatively, "Huo? President Huo?" Yes, Huo Liancheng replied. "Oh my God." Before he could ask anything, he heard a loud sound from the other side. It seemed like her phone had fallen to the ground. But in just a few seconds, Wu Wenjing's voice sounded again. She was very anxious. "President Huo, is Jian Yun with you? How is she? Is she okay?" "Why do you ask?" Huo Liancheng narrowed his eyes and said calmly, "Why do you ask her? What did you mean when you said she hadn't eaten for days?" On the other end of the phone, Wu Wenjing hesitated and said, "President Huo, I don't know why you and Jian Yun quarreled earlier, but I want to tell you that she really isn't what you think she is," she continued. "Her mother was seriously injured and was hospitalized. She had a craniotomy, but she hasn't woken up yet. She's been staying in the ICU for a long time, and the cost of a day is more than 10,000 yuan. Her father had an affair. 6 years ago, her mother fell down from upstairs and was lying on the floor. All the medical expenses, Jian Yun had worked hard to save up so much money. But these 10 days had not arrived yet. 200,000 was almost gone. She continued to say she had no choice but to go dancing." The reason Wu Wenjing chose to tell Huo Liancheng everything was because she could not bear to see Jian Yun so tired. Now only Huo Liancheng could help her, so she could not keep quiet. It did not matter if Jian Yun blamed her. When Huo Liancheng heard this news, he was very shocked. He never thought that under her calm exterior, she would hide so much. No wonder she was very different from the warm and lively appearance in his memory. So there was actually such a reason. After a moment of silence, Huo Liancheng finally opened his mouth. Then why didn't she look for me? Wu Wenjing sighed. Isn't it because you humiliated her? Even if someone beat her to death, she would not look for you. Jian Yun and I have known each other for so long, and I understand her bad temper the most. She has always been strong when facing a strong person. She does not like to be misunderstood the most. Huo Liancheng was silent. Wu Wenjing thought that he was angry, so she hurriedly said, President Huo, I don't mean anything else. It's fine if you don't want to help. Let's think of another way. Is Jian Yun by your side? How is she? Tell me where you are. Can I go in and look for her? She is here with me. Nothing much. You go back first. Huo Liancheng was about to hang up the phone. Hey, President Huo, wait. Wu Wenjing suddenly said urgently, I still have something to say. Huo Liancheng paused and heard Wu Wenjing anxiously say, President Huo, Jian Yun is very good. She's really good. You don't misunderstand her. If you don't like her, please don't hurt her. Do you think I will hurt her? Huo Liancheng raised his eyebrows and said coldly. Wu Wenjing gritted her teeth and decided to let her make things clear. She said, I don't intend to continue working in the Mings. I'm not afraid of you anymore. Jian Yun told me about you. I don't know if you are sincere to her, but she doesn't accept you because she doesn't dare to love you and doesn't want to get hurt again. Her father and Shu Haiyan have hurt her too much. All right, that's all. After she finished speaking, Wu Wenjing quickly put away her phone and held her beating heart. She was sweating profusely. Jian Yun was right. Huo Liancheng's aura was really strong. Even if it was just a phone call, it made people feel pressured. Thinking about it, if anyone got along with him in the future, it would definitely be a lot of pressure. On the other side, Huo Liancheng held Jian Yun's phone. Wu Wenjing's words made him calm down a little because of Jian Yun's provocation. He turned his eyes to look at the silent person lying on the bed. In the dark yellow light, her skin was as white as jade. Her long eyelashes covered her bright black eyes, the tip of her nose, and her beautiful lips. She was really very beautiful. Compared to 6 years ago, she had a more settled charm. She was like an orchid in a deep valley. She was elegant and refined, but also proud. Huo Liancheng stared deeply at Jian Yun. Even after she passed out, the space between her brows was still tightly knitted, and there was an irreconcilable melancholy. He held her hand. Her fingers were slender, soft and tender, as if they had no bones, making him very fond of them. Her phone rang again. Huo Liancheng picked it up. When he saw the name, a cold light flashed across his eyes. Shu Haiyan was her first love again. Since she had already reunited with him, why didn't she ask him for help? Wu Wenjing's words were clear. This Shu Haiyan's family background should be pretty good. He should have hundreds of thousands. Huo Liancheng picked up the phone, but he still didn't say anything. Shu Haiyan's side, however, cried out in surprise. Yunduo, you finally picked up my phone. I went to the hospital to look for you, but you are not here. Also, why don't you accept my money? I just want to help you. I have no other intentions. Hearing this, Huo Liancheng directly pressed the phone and conveniently blacklisted Shu Haiyan. Very well, she did not accept Shu Haiyan's help. It seemed that they did not get back together. Huo Liancheng thought for a moment and then turned on his phone. When he saw Jian Yun playing with her phone, he had recorded her unlocked password. This time, he easily removed the lock screen and flipped through the text messages and phone records. Recently, other than Wu Wenjing and Luo Yanyan, there was also a phone number called Ouyang Beicheng. She had called many times. Who could this Ouyang Beicheng be? Huo Liancheng secretly remembered this name. When he looked down again, he suddenly found that a few days ago in the afternoon, she had called her father. When he saw the time, wasn't he calling Yin Che at that time? He remembered that Yin Che had told him that there was a little girl in the hospital garden who had called her father to ask for money to pay for her mother's hospitalization fees. However, her father had rejected her. Then, the little girl cried very sadly. Could it be that Yin Che was talking about Jian Yun? No wonder he felt his heart palpitate for no reason at that time. It was actually because she was crying? Chapter 109, Answer Me 2 Questions. When Jian Yun woke up, she found that the light in front of her was very dim, which made her feel a little dazed, thinking that she was lying on her own bed. In the haze, she raised her hand and pressed on her forehead that was in pain as if it was about to split open. With one hand supporting the bed, she wanted to get up. She had already clearly seen the furnishings in the room and immediately realized, You're awake? A low voice sounded by her ear. Jian Yun turned her head and found Huo Liancheng sitting on the chair beside the bed. He squinted his eyes and looked at her. Jian Yun almost jumped up from the bed. She wanted to run, but the moment her feet touched the ground, she felt dizzy. She could not control her body and fell down. However, Jian Yun did not fall. Huo Liancheng reached out and hooked her waist. He was very close to her, so close that she could see his reflection clearly, so close that she could smell the special aura on his body. But Jian Yun did not have any thoughts of daydreaming. At this moment, she only wanted to run. She really did not want to see him again. Jian Yun reached out and pushed Huo Liancheng. This time she pushed him away very easily. She did not even look at him and quickly put on her shoes. She turned around and took the bag on the bed, turned around and ran. Huo Liancheng did not stop her. He just leisurely leaned back on the chair with his long legs crossed. He lowered his head to look at the things in his hands. Jian Yun only felt a light flash at the corner of her eyes. She turned her head to look and saw Huo Liancheng holding a red rope in his hand. He was focused on the ring-like thing hanging on the red rope. Jian Yun was first stunned, then she touched her neck. There was nothing. She suddenly looked up and said angrily, "That's mine. Return it to me. Where did it come from?" Huo Liancheng looked up at Jian Yun. There was a complicated look in his eyes, but it quickly disappeared. "It's none of your business." Jian Yun was furious. She stretched out her hand. "Give it back to me." Huo Liancheng took the red rope with his fingers and slowly handed it to Jian Yun. Jian Yun went forward to take it, but Huo Liancheng pulled his hand back. "Where is the original chain?" He looked at Jian Yun and asked in a low voice. "It's sold." Jian Yun grabbed the ring and put the red rope around her neck. She did not want to stay with Huo Liancheng any longer. She turned around and left again. Huo Liancheng watched Jian Yun walk to the door. He said slowly, "There's a check for 1 million here. Do you want it?" Jian Yun's hand had already turned the door handle. When she heard this, a burst of anger erupted in her chest. She suddenly turned around and glared at Huo Liancheng. She said angrily, "Is it great that you have money?" Huo Liancheng raised his eyebrows. He stared at Jian Yun and twirled the check between his two long fingers. "You want to give me charity?" Jian Yun immediately reacted and sneered. "I don't need it. I'm short of money, but I can earn it by myself." "How do you want to earn money?" "By receiving guests. 1 million. How many guests do you need to receive to earn it?" Huo Liancheng narrowed his eyes. His tone was calm, but there was a dim light in his eyes. Jian Yun clenched her fists. Her face was red because of anger. She wanted to refute Huo Liancheng, but in the end, she did not say anything. She only turned around and prepared to open the door. "As long as you answer 2 of my questions, this check will belong to you." Huo Liancheng saw Jian Yun's expression and felt inexplicably irritated in his heart. Jian Yun really wanted to open the door and leave. She did not know that there was someone as cruel as Huo Liancheng in this world. She humiliated her again and again with an unwarranted crime. But her mother was lying in the ICU, wearing a ventilator and suddenly appearing in front of Jian Yun. The high medical fees almost crushed her. If she could not pay the money, even if the hospital would not remove her mother from the ICU, the expensive medicine would definitely stop. Money. She needed money. Jian Yun closed her eyes. Her hand, which was placed on the handle of the door, could no longer move. She endured and endured. Only then did she turn around and face Huo Liancheng. Her voice lowered. "What is the problem?" When Huo Liancheng saw Jian Yun really turn her head back, the nerves in the corner of his eyes twitched and twitched. He was silent for a moment. "If you don't ask, I will leave." Jian Yun lowered her eyes to hide the disappointment in her eyes. She knew that someone as bad as Huo Liancheng must have seen that she needed money, so he changed his flowers to humiliate her. "Where did you spend the night last Sunday night?" Huo Liancheng finally opened his mouth and asked a question that confused Jian Yun. She thought that even if he wanted to ask, he would ask her. Was it really that kind of flesh business? Jian Yun frowned and thought for a while. Last Sunday it was just that he said no, and she would never have the chance to see Shu Haiyang again. Why did he ask this? "I am at Wu Wenjing's house." Jian Yun did not know what Huo Liancheng meant, but she still told him the truth. Huo Liancheng raised his eyebrows and asked, "The second question is, have you and Shu Haiyang gotten back together?" "You care too much." Jian Yun was angry. She really did not know why he always cared about her and Shu Haiyang. "Answer." Huo Liancheng said. "No," Jian Yun emphasized and said angrily. "Really?" Huo Liancheng stared at Jian Yun as if he was trying to determine whether she was lying or not. "I said there was nothing, but there was nothing. If you don't believe me, then forget it." Jian Yun was angry. She really wanted to leave immediately, but reality did not allow her to be so willful. Especially when she really saw the check in Huo Liancheng's hand, her eyes turned red. With this money, she did not need to worry about not being able to pay her mother's medical bills anymore. "Come here." Huo Liancheng did not interrogate Jian Yun anymore. He nodded. "What are you doing?" Jian Yun stared at Huo Liancheng warily. "You don't want it anymore?" Huo Liancheng waved the check in his hand and asked in a deep voice, "Are you really going to give it to me?" Jian Yun did not believe that he had such good intentions. She was on guard and did not move. "If you do not want this check, then I will tear it apart." Huo Liancheng pretended to tear the check. Jian Yun saw that he really did it and immediately became anxious. To him, this 1 million might just be a grain of sand in his hand, but to her, it could save her life. "Don't tear it." Jian Yun did not even have time to think about it. She rushed over and reached out to grab the check from Huo Liancheng's hand. However, as soon as her hand reached over, Huo Liancheng grabbed it. He pulled her into his arms with force. Jian Yun was frightened and struggled with all her might. However, both of her hands were locked by him. She did not have any strength. After struggling a few times, she was so tired that she was panting. Her vision turned black and she could only give up struggling. "Does your neck hurt?" Huo Liancheng saw that Jian Yun did not move and he reached out to hook her chin. It seemed like he wanted to check her neck. Previously, he was too angry and did not lightly grab her neck. When she was lying down just now, he saw that there was a finger mark on her neck. I don't want the money. Let me go. Jianyun turned her head and avoided his hand as she said softly. She regretted not believing him just now, but in the end, it was because she was too greedy. If she did not want that 1 million, she would not have fallen into his hands now. Stay with me tonight. In silence, Huo Liancheng suddenly spoke. Chapter 110. Such an expensive price, you think too highly of me. Jianyun suddenly turned her head when she heard Huo Liancheng's words. She looked at Huo Liancheng and almost couldn't believe her ears. What did you say? Jianyun asked. Stay with me tonight. Huo Liancheng repeated. At this moment, he was hugging Jianyun and letting Jianyun sit on his lap. His hand was on her waist. His posture was ambiguous, but his eyes were very cold. Huo Liancheng, you want to sleep with me? Why did you say so earlier? Why did you play this trick? Jianyun suddenly smiled. Her eyelashes were curved and the corner of her mouth was raised, but there was not a trace of a smile in her eyes. What she said was also very ironic. But, Jianyun glanced at the check Huo Liancheng casually placed on the small table. Her hands grabbed his collar and said with a cold smile, 1 million per night. Such an expensive price. You think too highly of me. Shut up. Huo Liancheng's eyes began to twitch again. He twitched. The large hand he placed on Jianyun's waist exerted force, causing her waist to hurt. Don't you think I'm dirty? Jianyun asked. Why force yourself? Jianyun continued to speak coldly, wanting to anger him. Huo Liancheng did not say anything. Instead, he suddenly stood up. He carried Jianyun to the bathroom. There was already a jar full of warm water in the luxurious bathtub. The corner of his mouth was pursed. He was as sharp as a knife. He ignored Jianyun's scream and threw her in without saying a word. Jianyun did not finish screaming when she suddenly fell into the water. The water in the bathtub immediately drowned her head. As she breathed, a large amount of water poured into her nose and throat. With a sound in her ears, a huge fear made her desperately reach up, wanting to grab something, and then she grabbed a pair of big hands. Jianyun grabbed those hands and did not let them go. Those hands also grabbed her and brought her out of the water. The moment Jianyun came out of the water, she immediately lay on the edge of the bathtub and violently coughed. At this time, her hair was completely soaked and stuck to her face. Her makeup was all messed up, and her face could not be distinguished whether it was tears or water that came out of her mouth and nose. She coughed and coughed. Suddenly, she burst into tears. The pressure and grievances that she had suffered over the past few days Norrids. Just like that, she sat in the bathtub. How did I offend you? Why do you always make things difficult for me? Jianyun screamed as she cried. Why do I have to bear everything alone? Ah! Huo Liancheng stood beside the bathtub. The water that had just splashed wet his clothes, but he did not seem to feel it. His face was gloomy as he looked at Jianyun crying. Until Jianyun had cried enough, she slowly changed from crying to sobbing and then to sobbing. Only then did Huo Liancheng squat down. He turned on the nozzle and pointed the hot water at Jianyun. With one hand, he slowly pushed away the wet hair on her face. Jianyun subconsciously turned her head and avoided Huo Liancheng's hand. Are you going to wash it yourself, or should I help you wash it? Huo Liancheng paused for a moment. Jianyun looked up in a daze. She did not seem to understand, but she immediately reacted when Huo Liancheng reached out to take off her clothes. Get out, Jianyun said in a hurry. Her voice was a little hoarse because she had coughed too hard just now. Huo Liancheng did not say much. He got up and left. Jianyun cried for a while and suddenly found that her heart was not that uncomfortable. She stopped for a while and reached out to unbutton her clothes. Her clothes were wet, and it was really uncomfortable to wear them. Just after unbuttoning 2 buttons, Jianyun suddenly heard the door open. She looked up and saw that the door was pushed open from the outside, and Huo Liancheng came in again. You. What do you want? Jianyun hurriedly covered her chest and stared at him with vigilance. If you don't mind going out naked after taking a bath, I don't mind either. Huo Liancheng waved the paper bag in his hand and placed it on the cabinet next to him. He then crossed his arms and leaned against it. Jianyun recognized the paper bag. It contained her clothes. She was carrying a big backpack today. When she changed into dancing clothes, she stuffed her own clothes and shoes into the bag. Is there anything else? Jianyun waited for a while and saw that Huo Liancheng had not left. She could not help but ask. No. Huo Liancheng did not seem to hear the order to leave from Jianyun's words. He still stood there and did not care about the wet spots on his pants and shirt. His handsome face was calm. Jianyun endured it and asked, Then don't you think you are an eyesore here? I have always been eye-catching. I have never been an eyesore. Huo Liancheng raised his eyebrows and answered naturally. Jianyun was angry. She gritted her teeth and did not say anything. The corner of Huo Liancheng's mouth slightly lifted. He did not continue teasing. He stood up straight and walked out of the door. Wash properly before coming out. Jianyun's eyes darkened and did not argue with him anymore. When the door closed again, she waited for a long time but did not see him come in again. Only then did she take off her clothes with ease. 15 minutes later, Jianyun opened the bathroom door. She had already put on her clothes. Her high heels were soaked in water when she was dancing. She took them off and threw them in the bathroom. There were no shoes in the paper bag Huo Liancheng gave her. She could only walk out barefooted. Fortunately, the interior of the room was covered with thick carpet. The heating was on, so she did not feel cold. After Jian Yun came out, she realized that this was a suite. The place she and Huo Liancheng had just argued was the living room outside. There were 2 bedrooms inside. The place where she had just taken a bath was near the living room of the outer room. As soon as she came out, she saw Huo Liancheng sitting at the table. He seemed to be writing something. Hearing the sound, Huo Liancheng also turned his head to look. He held a cigarette in his mouth and narrowed his eyes as he looked Jian Yun up and down. His eyes paused on her bare feet for a few seconds before landing on her wet, long hair. This time, he looked even longer because even Jian Yun herself did not know how charming she was at this moment. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying, but she could not cover her clear eyes that had been washed with water, her sharp chin and stubborn expression. She was like a fairy that had fallen into the mortal world, making people only want to cherish her. There's a breeze in the cabinet. He held the half-smoked cigarette in his left thumb and index finger, blew out a smoke ring, and said slowly. Jian Yun followed the direction he pointed and saw a blue wind blowing in the cabinet on the left hand of the door. She did not say anything and walked over to pick up the wind. She entered the suite and started to blow her hair. 10 minutes later, Jian Yun dried her hair. She put away the wind blowing and got up to walk out. She was about to put the wind back. When she walked to the outer room, she found Huo Liancheng still sitting at the table. It seemed that he had not finished writing. Jian Yun frowned and did not know what he wanted to play. She could only ignore him. She was much calmer now and did not expect to get the million. She just wanted to go home. She turned her head and looked at the clock in the corner of the wall. It was 9:10. Other than the time she took to shower and blow her hair, she had only fainted for a dozen minutes.